Good afternoon. It is Thursday, April 23rd. If you noticed, the video is coming out a bit later today. We had power issues here, so the power's been out for a good bit of the afternoon. So we're going to look at a shorter psalm today, just because I haven't been able to do much with power being out. We're going to look at Psalm 142. This is the last psalm we're going to look at as we've been considering some psalms of laments. And we're going to start, I think, on next week, start looking at 2 Thessalonians and spend some time there for a little bit. But we're going to come together today and look at Psalm 142. This is another Psalm of David. Of course, King David, wrote many of our Psalms. This is entitled Maskell of David when he was in the cave. This is a companion psalm with Psalm 57. It's during the time that David is in the cave when he's hiding from Saul. Of course, David had been anointed king. He had not yet been crowned king, but Saul sought after him, sought his life, and David is in the cave, hiding from Saul. And this is where we see this psalm being written from that perspective. You think about all the armies and those who were searching down David to end his life. So let's read together Psalm 142 together, and then we'll just spend some time, just a brief time today, probably a little bit shorter than normal, as we consider this psalm. Psalm 142. With my voice I cry out to the Lord. With my voice I plead for mercy to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. When my spirit faints within me, you know my way. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see. There is none who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for my soul. I cry to you, O Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Attend to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison, that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. As we consider the whole of this psalm, we need to be reminded, or keep in mind, I should say, as we go through this psalm, where David is. David is in isolation. He's literally hiding in a cave because he's fearful of if he comes out, what will happen to him. Death will certainly be there for him. His foes, his enemies will swarm him, and he's afraid. He is isolated, he is alone, and he is afraid. And so we see him come before the Lord in verse 1 and 2. With my voice I cry out to the Lord. With my voice I plead for mercy to the Lord. David, in his despair, in his isolation, in his being distant from the world, is crying out for mercy from the Lord. It is good, it's right, it's proper when we feel isolated, when we feel entrapped, when we feel separated, like there is no hope around us, to cry out for mercy for the Lord. And how does he do this? And we see this in verse 2. I put my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. We tend to shy away from that word complaint. We think of complaint as, we associate it, I think, more with complainer. And we don't like complainers. We don't like people who complain. But that is not the exact gist of this word. When we say it's a complaint, this is something that I have that I don't like, that I want to voice as something that is, I want to be different. So it's a complaint saying, I don't like the situation that I'm in. I am trying to be faithful. I am seeking after you, and it has brought me to this cave. And so he pours out his complaint before him. He tells his trouble to the Lord, and it's from the Lord. It's not that he's accusing the Lord, but he is coming before him and confessing his trouble and hoping that the Lord would shine his mercy down upon him. And so that's what we see kind of in verse 1 and 2. As we go from 2 into 3 and 4, we see that David reminds us that there are none who have trusted in God. He says, look to the right and see. There is none who take notice of me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say take notice of God, but take notice of David. There's no refuge who remains to me. No one cares for my soul. No one cares, David believes, for him. No one is concerned about what he's going through at this point in time. He says, I look to the left, I look to the right, and it doesn't seem like anyone even cares to hear me. And I'm sure we can identify with that, right? As we're going through life, as we're going through struggles, as we're going through hurts, as we're going through pains, and sometimes it is a lonely and isolating experience. Sometimes that's by our own making, but not always. And we look around us to our left and to our right, and we say, there's no one who wants to hear me, who wants to take notice of me. There's no refuge that remains to me. No one cares for my soul. Have you ever felt in the depths of your despair that no one cared about your soul, whether you lived or whether you died? There was just no worry and concern for you. This leads David to cry out in verse 5, I cry out to you, O Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. He's just said, I feel like there's no one who cares for him. There's no refuge who remains for him. And in light of that, he cries out to God, who is his refuge. That when we feel this way, when we feel isolated, when we feel alone, when we feel separated, that we can come and we can cry out to God, who is our refuge. He said, you are my portion in the land of the living. David feels separate from that land. And maybe we can identify with that right now. What is it like to go out amongst the living? Of course, we're all kind of in that boat right now. Nobody's really going out. But we can cry out to God. In verse 6, he says, attend to my cry. This is hear me, answer me, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. David is acknowledging that he can't do this. There's not enough might, there's not enough strength in his arm to rid himself of his persecutors. But this is what he's certain of, that God is strong enough, that God is able. He is the one who is able to deliver. And so while we may not have the strength, he has the strength. In some ways, we can come during this time and say this. Our persecutor right now seems to be a virus. And there's in many ways, we look at this and we say, we're not strong enough. Our isolation is not going to conquer this virus. Right now, our medical ability is not going to conquer this virus. It is going to do what it's going to do. And we can say, I can't do this. It's too strong, but it's not too strong for God. And we should come before him in prayer and in supplication and crying out. He says, bring me out of my prison in verse 7, that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. David is certain that God can do these things and that there will be a reversal of his situation. That he'll no longer be stuck in this cave that has become a prison to him. That he'll be able to go out once again into the land of the living. That he would be able to give thanks, that I may give thanks to your name for all that you have done. There's a proper and right responding in praise to God as he answers our prayers. I actually think that's something we're very bad at doing. We're very good at coming and saying, oh Lord, would you please heal Aunt Martha? But once Aunt Martha is healed, we take it kind of for granted. We're not good about coming back and saying, oh Lord, I praise your name for the healing that you brought for Aunt Martha. We need to come and praise the name of the Lord as he answers our prayers. We even need to be able to come and say, Lord, you didn't heal Aunt Martha, but I know you're in control, and to still praise his name. And rather than being isolated, rather than being alone, he says, the righteous will surround me. Again, it's this reversal of his condition. It is a reversal of the state that he was in. No longer will the wicked and his enemies be all around him, but the righteous, the people of God, will be with him. For you will deal bountifully with me. David ends this psalm not with a question of whether or not God will answer, but a certainty of God answering. You will deal bountifully with me. David understands who God is. He understands what God can do, and he believes that God will deal bountifully with him. Now, again, I don't think this has to mean for us that God will physically deal bountifully with us. It doesn't mean that he will financially deal bountifully with us. And yet, even though we say that, we can say that he will deal bountifully with us. We know that through the shed blood of Jesus Christ, that he has given us more than we could ever hope for, more than we deserved. He has indeed dealt bountifully with us. I think sometimes we forget that in this life, we as Christians are daily wrestling with the fall, with sin. That the ultimate reward that we have has not yet come. It is coming, and we can say he will deal bountifully with us. There is a certainty in that. But until that day comes, we will be dealing with the effects of the fall all the days of our lives. Even up to that last day when we are called home and death takes us. But we know that death has no victory over us. That while we may die for a time, we will rise again from the dead when Jesus comes again. And so we can, with hope and certainty, deal with all that may come. And again, and I've said this in other videos, it doesn't mean we're irresponsible. I wear a seatbelt because it'll protect me. But at the same time, if it is my time and he is calling me home, I will go, and we need to be able to come to terms with that fact as well. We need to have that balance between being responsible and yet being relying and trusting on a good and gracious and sovereign God. So we come in our lament and we cry out, but we come crying out knowing who God is. Tomorrow I'll be working on our video for our worship service, but when we begin back next week, we'll be looking at 2 Thessalonians, I believe. Unless for some reason I change my mind, that's where we're going to land. Again, if you'd like, you can click up here and subscribe to the channel. You can click over here and see any videos that we've done in the past. You can like the video, and hopefully these are finding you well. And I'll be praying for you, each of you, and look forward to seeing you again. And we'll be with you for worship this Sunday and then Thessalonians next week.